Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Sunday morning talk. Before I start, we always like to give a little bit of reminders or reinforce some of the activities or opportunities that we have here at our FSS. And today, before I start with our text, I would like to bring this opportunity. If you are wondering what is the gospel at home, what are the benefits, why should we think about doing that at our houses, we have our welcome and assistance department, and they will be more than happy to have a conversation and explain. And if you decide to implement this important event or this important practice, let's say better, at your house, they will be more than happy to guide you. So you can reach out using our email, welcoming@fsscalgary.ca. Awesome. So for today, the text is text number 79 from the Living Spring, Francisco Cândido Xavier, by the Spirit Emmanuel. And the text is, "Let us follow peace. Seek peace and follow it." Peter, chapter 3, versicle 11. "Many people search for peace. Very few try to follow it. There are those who desire tranquility by any means. They sigh for it and they seek it in many places. However, they lose it as soon as the Lord gives them what they ask for. For instance, some people ask for material fortune, thinking it will bring them peace. Nevertheless, with the appearance of abundant wealth, they are tormented by 1,000 problems because they do not know how to distribute, help, manage, or spend it with simplicity. Other people pray for the blessing of marriage, but when the Father grants it, they do not know how to be fraternal towards their spouse, but are exasperated by all sorts of annoyances. Still, others request special positions of trust in areas of public usefulness, but when they find themselves honored with popularity and the expectations of many people, they abandon the blessings of their work and flee in fright. Peace is not physical indolence. It is health and spiritual joy. If it is true that all search for peace in their own way, it is crucial to realize that true peace is the result of a balance between our own wishes and the purposes of the Lord in whatever position we might find ourselves. Once we have received the task that heaven has entrusted to us, we have to know how to use the opportunity for our evolution and spiritual growth. Peter said, "Seek peace and follow it." However, in whatever situation we might find ourselves, there is no real peace without Christ within us. And the formula for integrating our souls with Jesus is invariable. Let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Unless we, as human learner, adapt our efforts to the renewing impulse of the Divine Master, instead of peace, we will continue to have an ongoing war inside our hearts. So let us pray. With this beautiful text of guidance on when we are searching for peace, let us find peace in a peaceful area, in a peaceful place within ourselves and within our hearts. With that peace in mind, let's connect with God, with our Master Jesus, with all our guardian angels, and the spiritual team that relentless work with us, together with us, in this journey, in this house, in the second house of love that is FSS, and connected to the superior and to the divine. Let's first be grateful. Be grateful for one more day, one more morning. Be grateful for this opportunity that we have to be here learning a little bit more about Jesus' teachings, about the divine laws, about what the Spiritism doctrine, based on our role model in our guide, has taught us, and all that information that can and will certainly help us in our journey of moral evolvement. Let's ask that we have one more blessed morning, that we are able to use all that information, to apply that information as much or as little as possible at the time that we are feeling right now, at the time that we are right now. Let's ask that the spiritual team, the enlightened spirits, can guide us and can help with the reflections and with all the information that we'll be talking about today. Let us have one more morning of peace, one more morning of fraternal gathering, one more morning of love together with Christ and God our Father. So be it. Okay, so the topic for today is about compassion, and compassion related to charity. What is the relationship that compassion has with charity? And we know that charity is, as we are going to talk about, is a maximum from the Spiritism. When we say without charity or outside charity, there is no salvation. And there is this virtue of compassion, and there is a strong link between compassion and charity. As with any other virtues, they are not separated, they're integrated in this divine and wonderful system. But today we would like to explore how compassion plays a role, a fundamental role, I would like to say, when we are practicing charity. So this talk is based in some reflections that Arthur Valadares has made when explaining compassion, also with the Gospel according to Spiritism, and during the reflections, or based upon the reflections that Arthur has made, he brings a lot of important texts and important information that help us and guide us in understanding compassion and charity. First is, and this is the base that he uses, a text called Se Compassivo from the book Spirit of Truth. The text would translate to Be Compassionate by Chico Xavier and Valdo Vieira. And this text is, this book actually has a lot of spirits, but we're going to take a look at this specific text, and it is by the spirit Caibar. Also, Livro da Esperança, text Compaixão e Socorro, or Book of Hope, text Compassion and Relief by Emmanuel and Chico Xavier. Refúgio, text Receita de Luz, or Refuge, Recipe for Light by the Spirit Emmanuel, psychographed by Chico Xavier. And Jesus no Lar, Mensagem de Compaixão, or Jesus in the Home, Message of Compassion, Chico Xavier, by the Spirit Neo Lúcio. Some of the objectives for today. So hopefully at the end we'll be able to have a little bit of more information or clarity, or we will hopefully improve a little bit of our knowledge in terms of what is the importance of compassion when practicing charity? And what is our understanding of compassion? What do we know about compassion? And what do dictionaries and all the electronic resources that we have at our disposal nowadays, how do they talk about compassion? And then in contrast, what do the superior spirits, based on Jesus' teachings and also the books from the Spiritism doctrine, how do they clarify and how do they help us understand this virtue? And how can we exercise compassion? We know that all virtues are not passive, they're all active, and they all require us that we include or we put forward our best efforts, the efforts that we have available right now according to each one of us strengths and each one of us capabilities at the moment. And hopefully with those examples, we can start thinking about how that compassion plays a role in our daily lives. And actually, I'd like to add, I was reading not from the Spiritism doctrine and about compassion, but compassion has taken a key, some sort of a key center or key place on the stage of our lives nowadays, especially with everything that is happening in our world nowadays with pandemic. But also when I was reading about some texts because of my work, and there's a lot about compassionate leadership and how leaders, whatever a leader can be, from a professional environment to in the not-for-profit or volunteer area, or even here in the context of our FSS or any other religious charity, there is this component of compassion and how leaders are invited to develop in the textbooks, saying that skill or that mindset, but it's interesting how the virtues and how Jesus has taught us on how to conduct or guide us, how to conduct our lives, how things are kind of integrating in not only in our private or personal life, but in all aspects of our lives. So that's why I thought it was a good reminder for me, even though we had done this talk last year, it was a good reminder to understand compassion and how compassion can be, is encouraged and strongly encouraged to be practiced in all aspects of our life. All right, so I would like to, and that's kind of how Arthur started his reflections about compassion, and he brings this quote from the book The Spirit of Truth in this chapter 96, where the text is "Be compassionate," and the Spirit Kaibar starts with this key and very assertive sentence saying, "Without compassion, there's no charity." So it's like, wow, that's a very, very firm and very assertive and very to the point. There's no more or less. There's no maybe. It's without compassion, there's no charity. And if there's no charity without compassion, and we know that one of the cornerstones, one of the cerns of the Spiritism doctrine is without charity there is no salvation. If we look into a little bit of logic, if the charity is this key, and there's a divine law, right? The law of love, charity, and justice. If there's no charity without compassion, we gotta learn. We are kind of have this strong invitation to understand how we should include or we should develop the compassion mindset, so we can truly practice what Jesus has taught us in terms of charity. So this Spirit Kaibar guides us that in order for us to reach charity, there is this requirement. It's a prerequisite. If we want to go and use the analogy, when we study something and we go to college or whatever, and there are some prerequisites for us to achieve a course or to go to the next step or to move along in our journey, here is again, this is a key step for us to develop charity, is to practice compassion. And so, if that is a key cornerstone for us to understand, let us kind of just remind what is charity based on what the Spiritism doctrine has taught us. And I encourage all of you to search in our YouTube. Sonia has done quite a few lectures or talks digging a little bit deeper into charity, into what this the Spiritism doctrine and what Jesus has taught us, what is it. So today I just want to bring one reminder from question 886, when Kardec asks, what is the true meaning of the word charity as Jesus understood? And the Spirit's answer: benevolence toward everyone, indulgence toward the imperfections of other, and forgiveness for offenses. So if you look at those, and in Portuguese we call them the BIP, B-I-P, right? It doesn't work here in English. But if we look at benevolence, and we look at indulgence, and we look at forgiveness, those are kind of three key pillars of charity. And if we remove the virtue compassion, is that possible? Do we think, is that possible for us to practice true charity as we practice those three pillars? And that puts us into perspective that for us to be benevolent, we need to, and we'll talk about understand, and all of them actually, benevolence, indulgence, and forgiveness, there is this key understanding component of the other, of what is the other is going through or went through. And not only the understanding, and we'll know, as Emmanuel again is very very firm in saying compassion doesn't stop at understanding. It requires an action. And all of that, benevolence, indulgence, and forgiveness, there's got to be an action from us. We got to start something, put our best effort so we can get into this definition and we can practice charity. Of course, we won't be able or everyone will know what is everyone's capability of doing that, going through those three key pillars. And we know that we will have as many opportunities as required for us if sometimes we are not able to complete all of those. And we're able to complete or better practice a few of those three key pillars. But we are here as a learner, right? The apprentice feeling, to keep practicing. Even if we make mistakes, we can reflect back and see what has happened that I was not able to complete what I was looking for. So now that we understand the three key pillars of charity, let's start digging into more of the concept. What do people say about compassion? And I brought one definition of compassion. This is from Wikipedia. And I was very glad, because it seems, we know that Wikipedia is this open source, that people go there and start inputting their thoughts. And someone was inspired, I think, by Emmanuel or the Spiritism doctrine. Because let's take a look at how Wikipedia describes compassion. Compassion can be described as an understanding of another's emotional state. Understanding. And I bolded understanding because Emmanuel is very brilliant, as we know, in kind of dividing compassion into elements. And the first element is to understand what is happening. And I've been talking about with the other, but whatever happens with the other, we are invited to start with ourselves. Being compassionate with ourselves is also about understanding. And maybe I would go one step further, not only understanding, but comprehending. The comprehension. What is all that meaning? As we'd like to say here, it's not about shoving down our emotions and putting them in a secret place. No, they're emotions and things and thoughts that are going with us. It has a key purpose. And it's that great invitation for us to understand why we are going through all of that, and being compassionate with us, and then we can understand and comprehend whatever is happening with our neighbors. But it continues. Compassion is often characterized by actions. When a person acting in a spirit of compassion seeks to help those for whom he has compassion. Again, as we're getting there with the definition by Emmanuel, compassion should not stop at the understanding and be passive. Compassion requires action. Action from us to act within ourselves, and action from us to act to or towards someone that we are feeling compassionate about. Compassion, and as Emmanuel mentioned, it's about relief. We are invited to put our efforts or our actions so we can provide relief for ourselves, for someone else, so we can, maybe if we fell a little bit, we can stand up and continue with our journey. And in order to stand up, or we can use, as we're going to use the parable of the passage of the Good Samaritan. That Good Samaritan took action when he saw the man lying down and hurt. He just didn't understand, oh, the man is hurt. He took action. He put the man in the back of his horse, and he took to that inn, to that hotel that could relieve the pain or the struggles of that man. And continuing, to have compassion is to remain in a positive emotional state while trying to understand the other without invading, however, his or her or your space. Another important point. So we talked about understanding, we talked about action, and we also talk about the positive emotional state. We'll see in the next slide the Gospel according to Spiritism, when talking about compassion and talk about pity. Not pity in the sense that we diminish the other, but pity when we feel compassionate towards another. Most of the time, the emergence of compassion will be from a sadness or a not very happy situation. But it's important for us to keep practicing that positive emotional state so we can control our thoughts, and with our thoughts connected to positivity, and with our thoughts connected to the divine knowledge and the positive emotional state, we are better prepared to take the actions. Can you imagine if we, in the moment of that sad or not that very happy moment, that compassionate knocks on our doors, and if we stay on the sadness or negative feeling, it will be an extra challenge for us to take on those actions. And again, without invading the other space, we always are invited to offer our compassion and our actions, but we know the law of free will. Sometimes that action will not be receptive, and that's okay. we respect the other and we can stop at the understanding. But no, there is another thing that we can do that is very actionable. It doesn't seem actionable in a tangible way, material way, but if that other it's not receptive, we can always pray. Pray is kind of, it is a strong, actionable, tangible, and actionable activity or step that we can take towards our neighbor. And I'd like to bring also a description or an explanation that Arthur brings when he kind of goes into the root of the word compassion. So compassion in Greek is about pathos. Pathos is a sentiment, and passion is an expression of feeling with the heart. Isn't that? I thought that was beauty. It's beautiful. We feel with the heart, and we feel with the heart with someone. We create a bond with another being or with ourselves. It's bonding with someone else and also within ourselves, and then we experience that bond. We experience that feeling, that sentiment within ourselves or with our neighbor. It's a connection that we create with each other. And Arthur always brings this explanation about when we have compassion or we express or exercise compassion. It's like when we put that bond, it's like we build a bridge or we build kind of that pipeline that connects my heart, even with my heart. Maybe I'm looking for that connection within myself, but also that connection, that bridge that with our neighbor. So I thought that analogy of the bridge and that pipeline or that bond or that connection is such an important way for us to visualize how compassion works. And as I mentioned, the Gospel according to Spiritism talks about compassion, even though a curiosity for those who read the Gospel according to Spiritism in Portuguese, and then when we look at the English translation, in Portuguese it starts with a piedade or pena, and in English it's straight up translated into compassion. So the spirits start talking about compassion and saying that compassion is the virtue that brings you closer to the angels. It is the sister of charity. Look at that. Similar to what Kaibar said. If it's the sister, there's no charity without compassion, which leads you to God. However, as the text elaborates on compassion, it starts saying that compassion is that melancholic but celestial precursor of charity. Why melancholy? Why is that compassion melancholy? And as I was describing, most of the time, compassion will be born next to maybe a painful moment. Maybe a struggle that we are facing or our neighbor is facing. Or what Kardec likes to say in his books is through the vicissitudes. And we know there is no shortage of struggles or no shortage of vicissitudes, because all of that, they're all opportunities for us to become a better immortal spirit. So it is born into those challenging moments. However, there is a purpose. There is a purpose for that to be the case. It is through, if we take the characteristics of God, where God is perfect, God is supreme, good, and just. So God, with all its wisdom, He built that compassion, that moment it is, that compassion emerged, or that sadness, or the painful, or the struggle, so the divine resources can be best used. Because we feel touched. And Arturo in another lecture said, when an opportunity of compassion arises in our life, it's like God knocking at our door, and the doors of our heart, saying, "Hey, Luis, there is a moment here that is arising, and I need to provide resources to you or to your neighbor. Can I count on you? Can you build that bridge? Can you build that pipeline so I can flow all my resources, infinite resources that I have, through you to that neighbor or to that other immortal spirit?" So we feel touch. We feel that our heart is building that connection so the divine resources can be to the best use and can reach out to that neighbor. And this is kind of an image, and that's what I've been telling you when Arturo says that compassion as a pipeline, or maybe now a better word could be as a bridge that takes the living spring of charity and love. Again, when God knocking at our doors and the doors of our heart, it's kind of Him asking us to be His instrument, to be that conduit of love and charity. We prepare compassion. If we put our mindset into the compassionate mode, we prepare the way. We prepare the way from heart to heart. So that living water or living spring, as we always like to read here, the book Living Spring, that living resources from resources of love or resources of charity can flow through. And why? Why should we be the instrument? Why should we be the conduit of that love? Because that neighbor, or even us, needs some comforting, needs some relief, needs some of the balming effect, so he or she can feel prepared, can feel welcomed, can feel loved, and can stand up. Using, if we're falling down, if you're fall down, we can stand up and continue the work. It's that consoling peace that God invites us to be His resources. That's why compassion is so important, because without that bridge, we won't be able to be benevolent. We won't be able to forgive, and we won't be able to be indulgent and understand what the other and also ourselves is going through. So after that, I would like to leave a reflection. What have been all my efforts, your efforts, everybody's efforts to build? Maybe I don't have it yet. Maybe I do have a little bit of a bridge and I need to maintain it, or I am at a point that I want to increase. So what are the efforts of building, maintaining, or increase our bridge, our pipeline of compassion for the true realization of charity? So I've been talking about this. Emmanuel, in the Book of Hope, describes compassion into two another key pillars. First, the role of compassion is to understand. Because if we don't understand what is happening with us or with the other, how would we be able to build that bridge? How would we be able to be God's resource to take the living spring to ourselves and our neighbors. But should never stop right there, because there is an action and a function of relief. We have, when we're practicing compassion, we have this call and this invitation to provide relief so that we can restore. We can, as I've been mentioned, so we can get up on our feet and continue our journey. Emmanuel always says, and he's very keen in making sure that we do our part and we complete our efforts to the best of our ability. And as we go through our learning experiences, it is required this understanding and relief to be complete in the compassion, instead of beating and blaming. And I remember one passage from our Daily Bread when Emmanuel, I think also, when he talks about pity and compassion. Sometimes when we take some stances or a mindset of, I'm going to help neighbor A, but how I will do that, but I don't think that that person really deserves because he or she has done something that I don't agree. It's when we do our actions, but there's a lot of buts and howevers. So the invitation is, take out all of that. Take out the beating and blaming, even within ourselves, if something didn't go according to our plans. He says that there's no point in vibration of that sentiment of compassion, but emphasizing the negative act. I'm not saying that we need to be complacent, but it's important that we take that action. So we find ways to materialize our help in ourselves or in others. That materialization, as I was explaining, he mentions there are two kind of ways. One is with can be material, and another one can be moral, right? Let's take the example of the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan, he mobilized first his moral actions to understand and to help that individual, to help that man that was lying down. But the Good Samaritan, and also the Good Samaritan, mobilized his fraternity, his charity, his indulgence. And also, he also mobilized the material aspect of it. He took that man, he put that man in the back of the horse, and also he paid for that man to be in a place where he could be restored, where he could have relief. Sometimes it will be one of the best actions can be silence in some instances, not saying anything. But there is another action that can be done in addition to that. That's our pray, right? If that person is not receptive, or the best course of action is to be silent, we can always pray for that person to realize or to find the answers that person is looking for, or to find the point or in time where that person can continue with his or her journey in becoming evolved immortal spirit. As I mentioned, sometimes in the moral aspect of it, we're not saying that compassion should be applauded or be in agreement or be complacent with something that someone has done that is like clearly wrong. We're not saying that. We should say, okay, we know that there's yes and yes and no and no. If something has been done and it's wrong, it's important that we take the necessary actions to address that. But we should not, again, be in the beating and blaming mindset. And continue with another point about compassion that I thought that was very related to our reality, material reality on earth, from the book Recipe for Light, when it describes compassion is a recipe for light for the soul to be ascend to the divine realms. However, it somehow resembles a medical prescription in relation to health. For it to reach the precise effects in ourselves, it is not enough if it is recorded safely and accurately only in our feelings. We must be willing to use it. Simple as I go to the doctor prescribes something. If I'm going through a material body disease or something, if there is a medicine and the doctor prescribed, if I don't take it, how am I going to be able to recover? Same thing. If we don't take the actions in compassion, how am I going to reap the benefits of developing that virtue and also helping our neighbor? Another reflection: how many of our feelings of compassion have become tangibly helpful to us and to others? How many times we went beyond the understanding and we did something for ourselves or to the others? Exercising compassion, and I bring here one passage from Paul in the letters to Timothy, chapter 4, verse 7. Rather train ourselves for godliness. Godliness, compassion, or piedade, pity are all synonyms. So if compassion, godliness is to be enlightened, it's imperative that we exercise this understanding. And understanding does not come to us without making that effort. So it's important that we look deeply and we do that self-assessment, that self-encounter within ourselves. Take a look of what am I feeling? What is going through? What is happening with me? What are my emotions, so I can better understand what is happening with the other. Here, Saulo, I was forgetting his name. Saulo makes a reflection when we are talking about exercising compassion. Sometimes it's way easier when we exercise compassion to someone that was a victim of an act, for example. The victim, it's easier for us to develop that understanding. However, there's a big invitation for us to exercise compassion to the ones that practice that act that resulted into a victim. We're all sons of God. So there is this act of developing that compassion and understanding that person that committed that act. So it's important for us to practice not to a selected few, but to all of us. So now some examples of exercising compassion, and I would like to bring two examples from Jesus in the home in the message of compassion when Jesus was with his disciples and the apostles, and they were kind of asking and struggling a little bit with the situation that they were facing at that time. And I always like to say, even though it was 2,000 years ago, it's still even more so relevant to our reality. And I'd like to bring two examples of what they asked Jesus and say, how can we practice compassion in this case? And Jesus guide them. First is James asked, Master, added James, son of Zebedee, how to act before the ones who attack us brutally? How do we develop compassion about it towards that person? And Jesus says, a man who is driven by violence emphasize Christ kindly. And again, all the descriptions in this case, Neo Lucio, the superior spirits give those characteristics of Christ, even though the person asking that question was a little bit like shaken and it's like trying to understand. And Jesus, with all his calm and his peaceful mind state, kindly gives some reflections and guidance. So emphasize Christ kindly. Who is driven by violence must be mad or poisoned. Let us help him recover. There is one question in the book, the Spirit's book. I won't remember the number, but it says, does evil really exist? And the Spirit said, actually doesn't. What does exist is ignorance. So here, that there is this invitation for us to understand that in some cases we are ignorant in some portions or some areas of information, and that person that attacked us brutally, that person might be in the ignorance state, right? And here, how can we help that person recover? In this case, in the attack, the first, I'm not saying there is kind of a difference between attacking like physically. We're not saying that we should just let it happen. There is the defense, right? That we should kind of stay away. And so there is this kind of defense and the hit back. So here is like we're invited not to hit back, right? And give in the same fashion or in the same way that we have been attacked, because that person needs recover. And the best we can do is understand that ignorance and pray. Pray for that person to recover from that ignorance state. Another example. What about when our house is plagued by crime? How will I proceed before the one who betrays my trust, who dishonors my name and or bleeds my home? And the Master says, have pity or compassion or godliness on the delinquent of any class, Jesus explained, and do not wish to violate the law that your neighbor disrespected, because the persecutor and the criminal of all situations carry a burning fire. One fault does not rescue another fault, and blood does not wash blood. Forgive and help. Time is in charge of giving back to each creature according to their effort. Again, another invitation, or bringing that pillar of charity, the indulgence and forgiveness. We know that we have all the divine laws that coordinate everything that's happening, not only in this world that we're living right now, but the whole universe. And we know that there are laws that are here just to protect us. And we know that if something happens, and I bolded or highlighted that one fault does not rescue another fault, and blood does not wash another blood, because Jesus has taught us that we don't need to react the same way. We have the laws of cause and effect, and we have all the mercy from God that will guide to a situation that everybody will learn. If they committed a mistake, there will be an opportunity to that person that committed that mistake to learn and not to repeat that. And will be as many time as required for that, for all of us to recover and to learn if that mistake was committed. The forgiveness, right? And I can't remember now who said that, but there is, when we are a receiver, when we were impacted by something from another one, and it's important in that forgiveness process that when we receive that sadness, we don't carry that sadness with us. I thought that was very, very enlightening for me, because even though I was a receiver and that sadness kind of reached to me, it's important that I practice and understand and separate that sadness that does not belong to me. And let's go back to the definition and to the Gospel according to Spiritism. Isn't that sadness, that vicissitude, that sad moment, it's in that melancholy, right? It's in that challenge situation that compassion arises, and the invitation for me to understand what is happening with the other and separate. And again, remember the positive emotional state that I separated from that sadness. And towards the end, in that be compassionate, Kaibar says, only consoling compassion brings joy to the spirit, creating elevation and value. Let us flee the apparent compassion that is manifested in crocodile tears, gesture and pompous exclamations in the artificial scenarios of pretense. Commiseration is the practice of compassion, is measured by the fraternal devotion and solicitude it promotion. So here there's this big invitation for us to assess all of our actions and seeing if we are really practicing the compassion that Jesus has taught us. And to explain a little bit there, Arthur uses kind of the analogy of a tree. When we are analyzing a tree, the biggest analysis component is not kind of how beautiful the trunks are, or the leaves, or how beautiful the flowers are, but what is the fruit that tree is producing? Because the fruit is what gives us food and what is giving us sustenance, right? So when you're practicing that action of compassion, am I really devoted to God? And that reminds me again of law of adoration. Are my actions related to the devotion of God, to the divine laws? Is that the fruit that I'm producing? Is that the why I'm doing? Or my actions are more to fulfill some of my egoic feelings? Maybe it's just apparent, just for others to see. Or is that to fulfill my pride or my selfishness? So it's important that we assess and we measure. Am I being fraternal? Am I devoted? Am I doing this into adoration of God? Important reflection for us. And to finish, and with the certainty that sincere compassion never expresses cowardice to overthrow the good, nor ridiculous to excite the laughter of others, let us embrace it as a force for the renewal of souls and the interior light of true life, eternalized by God. Be compassion. So there is a lot of courage, indeed. There's a lot of dedication and strong will to be compassionate in a world that we're living now that is very indifferent to those who suffer and make us suffer. Another reflection that I would like to end is Arthur, as he was analyzing the Good Samaritan, the passage started saying the Good Samaritan was moved by compassion, right? So most of the time when we are talking about compassion towards others, there is this external influence, that external scenario or situation that we are led to feel something. And why is that? Because we are a hidden agent of God. God, with all his divine resources, with mercy and his compassion towards all his sons and daughters, it is within that situation, the melancholy situation, that it's the best soil for compassion to be emerge and to be brought up, because it's where we are in the best state and we are touched. So God can use us as this resource, the resource of all the source of love that He has, and He promotes us through it, promotes the love within us and through us in this universe. And this source is all unlimited, right? So if in many situations that God will knock at our hearts and the doors of our hearts, let us be prepared and let God enter, so they can use us as an instrument to console the ones who suffer. It can be us. It can be our neighbors. And let us be ready to build that bridge, to build that pipeline and help us and our society. And just all my reflections, what have been our efforts to build, maintain, increase our bridge of compassion for the true realization of charity. How many of our feelings of compassion have become tangibly helpful to us and to others? Have I sought devotion, fraternal feelings in my efforts to practice compassion? Have I accepted God's invitation to be His instrument to cultivate love in me and bring love to my neighbors? Those are my 4 reflections for, not for today only, but for my journey. Reflections recall the Paul's wording: if I speak in the language of men or of angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. Oh, that's without the love and compassion, we cannot comprehend our neighbor's language. Beautiful, Sonia. Thank you very much. That's such a brilliant addition and passage that really talks about the role of love in comprehending, right? The role of love in understanding. The role of love in relieving and restoring our neighbors. And without that, we are just kind of repeating without the meanings. And that, even that sentence or that passage from Paul kind of brings me into that why of that commiseration or that measure of compassion. Why am I doing that, right? Am I doing that together with God's love, with a fraternal feeling to truly help myself and the other? Thank you very much. Awesome. So let's do our final prayer. So connected and continue with this feeling and this sentiment of compassion, of charity, benevolence, indulgence, and forgiveness. Let's stay connected, not only now, but in all moments of our lives with our Father God, with Jesus, our guide and model, through our guardian angels and all the spiritual team that helps our house, FSS, our families, and our society. Let's be grateful again for one more opportunity to understand the role of compassion, how compassion is important, and how without it we won't be able to really practice charity. Let us keep reflecting into how each one of us are building that bridge, are being that instrument of God to help disseminate and spread love to ourselves, to our neighbors, and to our society. Let's ask that we have one more blessed week, a week of serenity, a week of peace, a week that if we encounter situations of being that instrument of God, the situations that we can be moved by compassion, that we can start building that bridge, and we can exercise compassion as Emmanuel clarified for us. Let us comprehend and understand, and let us take the actions to relieve and restore ourselves and our neighbors. So be it.